few lessons learned about the Colonial Pipeline attack, and we have a silver lining update.
Hey, John, I know we've heard a lot about the Colonial Pipeline attacks, and seems like there's another news story that came out to where the breach seemed to have occurred from a compromised VPN password. What could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so, in the continuing saga of the Colonial Pipeline incident, there's a lot of, little bits of information to glean from the various things that have come out since the initial ransomware attack occurred. So Bloomberg actually released a news article, I think it was maybe last Friday, discussing some of the actual ways in that the attackers were able to get in. And there's some really interesting aspects of it. So as you mentioned, the information that they're reporting is that the attackers were able to breach the network because they found a inactive/unused account that was able to be used to initiate a session into their corporate VPN. So once they could get into the corporate VPN, they could do, what they needed to do for the rest of the attack. The obvious question there is, well, why was this inactive or unused account still hanging around? So this was for a user who I believe had left or had not been using this account. They also did find evidence. They didn't confirm that this is how the attackers, got the login ID and password, but they found that this login ID and password for this particular user was found in various data breaches as well. So there's some suspicion that maybe this user, reuses passwords. So we've seen that a lot, right? So, and we always recommend against it. If you're a user, always have a different password for every single site, because if your password for this one site gets compromised, but you use it in other places, then the attackers can, use that same login ID and password at these other locations or try them. They'll do, credential stuffing attacks against various things in order to get in there. So tip number one is, obviously a good practice is to monitor your access to various systems, including your VPN. So if you have login IDs that have not been used in, let's say, X number of days, I don't know, you pick a number, let's say 90 days it hasn't been used, well, then maybe it should just be, deactivated and some other, process needs to be engaged to reactivate that user ID. Don't leave unused user IDs active in the system for years, because somebody could come along long after it's, the person has left the company and, continue to use that as a means to get in. Again, we already mentioned, don't reuse passwords. That's an obvious thing that we talk about a lot on the show. The other thing is notably with this, since the breach was through their corporate VPN, one of the big recommendations we make all the time is to use multi-factor authentication. In this case, login ID and password was the only thing they needed in order to, stand up the VPN client and connect into the corporate VPN for Colonial Pipeline. So, obviously a multi-factor solution, that's something where, that can't really be transmitted in a data breach, because the password changes every 60 seconds or so, or the second factor authentication does. And then lastly is that the hackers use they used their access to install the ransomware, and then they stole a large amount of data from the company. So whether this person the user ID that they used was supposed to have access to that data is one of the questions that I don't know has been determined or not. But having a good policy to control your data access using, the least privilege principle is a good recommendation, because maybe if that had been applied here, maybe this user would not have access to maybe as much data as was needed. I'd also recommend that, for certain businesses where it makes sense, at your corporate egress points, monitoring for large data egresses that might have triggered an alert such as this, is another good indication of something to look out for. It's kind of after the fact, but if you see a ton of data all of a sudden leaving the network from a single source, that might be an indicator that something is strange. Also, it could be, an insider or some sort of data exfiltration from, a disgruntled employee or some other reason, others besides ransomware as a reason to go monitor for things like that.
I'm kind of guessing that's one of the things they're looking into is that if this account was an old one, could it have been the person, involved with the person who used to use it, as the original owner of that account, that password. If it is something that they can attribute to a single person, I suspect they're talking to that person.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's probably true, too. I don't know if they mentioned that in the story or not. I think there's a lot of arrows pointing, in terms of the dark side group and how they operate. I think it's probably unlikely that it's the real person is involved in it anyway. I think their credential is probably just lifted probably from a data breach, because we know that it appears in some data breaches, and that's how it was used. But I'm sure that, that person's being questioned about it as well. So another good reason to use really strong passwords and use different ones everywhere and have a really good, strong security posture about how you handle your passwords and other credentials like that, so that you don't end up on the receiving end of being unwittingly used in, maybe some attack like this person, obviously was here. The one other thing, we had one other very late breaking news that just came out, at the time of the recording here this morning, that the Department of Justice just announced that they were able to recover $2.3 million, roughly half of the ransom that was collected by the hackers for the Colonial Pipeline breach. And it's kind of interesting because the Department of Justice, they announced that they actually recently created a ransomware and digital extortion task force, which is a new task force that's specifically set up to look at these types of ransomware cases, especially, in high profile infrastructure type companies and organizations that are going to have a high impact on, the function of, the United States in general. And its population. One of the things they did here, a lot of people think that using cryptocurrency is anonymous. And it is anonymous from the standpoint of you don't know who is necessarily using the cryptocurrency. But the one thing that is not anonymous is all of the transactions. So every single cryptocurrency transaction for Bitcoin is recorded on the public distributed ledger. So, when you buy something in using Bitcoin, it'll be recorded on a public ledger, and that ledger can be mined. You can go to a website and go look at, a particular Bitcoin hash and see all the stuff that they've, exchanged monetarily with Bitcoin. And so this team used that to kind of follow the money because they knew an address that the money was to be delivered to, and they followed it along until they found out where it ended up. And it appears, I don't know if this is confirmed, but, the way the dark side ransomware group works is it's in this ransomware as a service model. So they basically have an affiliate program. There's a group of guys, the dark side team, that wrote the ransomware itself. And then they set up a affiliate program where affiliates can go get the malware, they deploy it and attack and, do their campaigns against targets. They keep 85% of the profits, and then 15% go back to the original dark side, development team. So what their suspicion is that this money that they were able to recover was from the digital wallet for the affiliate that was involved as part of this account. They don't exactly explain how they got the private encryption key that's tied to this Bitcoin wallet for the affiliate account, assuming it is an affiliate account. But it could be, through some other search and seizure that they had done for something else. I don't really know. I don't think they're going to probably tell you their secret sauce of how they're doing things. And when I say they, I mean the Department of Justice. But this is kind of a good news story that at least, a large portion of the ransom that they did pay out has been recovered. And, so that's good going forward. And I just wanted to, as we said, continuing saga, there's a lot of things to learn about, maybe some tips and tricks that people can, learn from, so maybe they don't find themselves in the same predicament, down the road here.
Yeah, right. And with the saga, it just reinforces that never trust but always verify concept, right? So not like it used to be, where it was trust but verify. Now that just really comes home, right? Never trust, always verify in this case, especially. So,
Yep.
This was on the IT side, right? More not the OT side or the operational technology. So was the OC side brought down by the company, and this was mainly on the IT side of the house? Or because the way I understood, there was no true, attack that actually moved into the operational side, your actual, gauges and pipes and all the SCADA type stuff. This is more on the IT side, correct?
I don't know for sure. That might have been covered in some of the earlier stories.
Right.
I don't know the extent of what they were able to compromise,
right,
and or what the data was that they took and were holding ransom. I believe they did a double extortion type of scenario here, where they threatened to both hold their data for ransom, but if they don't pay, they threatened to release a lot of this data that they had acquired to the public, as another kind of like double extortion type of scheme there. So, but I'm not sure that I have the information, but it might be out there in other stories about.
Yeah, and it may be early too, because like you said, they're still under doing a lot of follow up and post investigation. So I just didn't know if maybe that had been determined or stated anywhere. Yeah.
Right. I believe that they did shut down a lot of the IoT based stuff that controlled a lot of the pipeline, because obviously a lot of the gas wasn't piping up at the northeast coast. So I'm assuming a lot of that IoT type infrastructure was, maybe out of caution that they suspended delivery through that because they weren't sure the extent of the breach or of the compromise. But I don't know if a complete analysis has been done in terms of, everything that happened.